It is 6 o'clock, and we are live here with the first episode of the new Oregon Ducks live show here on the Voice of College Football Network. My name is John Evans. Pleased to be joined by my co-host Owen Murray here. Owen, how are you doing this afternoon? You excited to talk some Oregon football?
I'm well, man. We're like the season's getting started here. We just had media day. Like it's starting to feel good now.
Yeah. Both of us were there at Media Day yesterday. Just take a little chance to introduce ourselves. Both of us are current students at the University of Oregon. We work in student media here. I've been with the radio station and with 24/7 Sports for the last couple of years. Owen's with the Daily Emerald. You're going to be a co-editor of the student newspaper here at the University of Oregon. So both of us have been here on campus, putting in the work, going to a lot of games, and just excited to be getting this going here on the Voice of College Football Network and talk some Oregon football.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great opportunity. We just talked. I was telling my dad when we were talking about this. I'm just like, I'm not even worried about it because I talked with John. We're just recording our conversations. It's just what we normally do, and it's great. I'm glad we get to bring it to people.
Exactly. We just the two of us. We like to talk ball. That's what we like to do here, and Oregon football is our thing. I mean, we were at media day yesterday, like you said. It's getting ready for training camp. Training camp, fall camp for them is going to be starting tomorrow. So, going to be exciting to get into this today. We're gonna just to give you guys a little bit of a preview of what we're going to be doing here on the show tonight. We're going to be just going over what we saw at media day yesterday. It was interesting to kind of first chance to get to talk to a lot of these players. Practices have been closed in the spring. They're going to be closed in the fall. Dan Lanning is locking things down SEC style. So it's a good chance to really talk to a lot of guys. They had 40 guys out there yesterday and kind of figure out what's going on with this team. And then after that, we're going to be able to kind of get into, a little bit of a preview of fall camp, look at some of the most interesting battles on each side of the ball. And then we're going to close out tonight's show by looking ahead towards the schedule for what the Ducks are going to be looking at this season, breaking down a little bit of each game and kind of giving the early preview. This is our first show. We're going to be doing this about once a week until the season starts. And then from there, just getting it going and talk about the Oregon Ducks every single day. Or every single week on here.
We talk about the Ducks every day. I love it.
We absolutely do. We got a lot of things going on as well. So, yeah. But and I'm just want to get it started here. We're gonna talk about media day from yesterday. What were some of the favorite things that you got to hear at media day yesterday, talking to these Ducks?
Well, man, I was really excited to talk to some of these new guys because they're guys you've talked to a little bit. Some of these guys that are going to be expected starters this year, and we'll get into them. But I love talking to Kenyon Sadiq, man. He's a great personality, and we got to see a little bit of him at Big Ten media days. But he's just such a great guy to talk to, and he seems excited. Dante Moore is big on him. He called him the best tight end in the nation. And then these guys were all rallying around him. He's got big shoes to fill. Terrence Ferguson, an LA Ram now, but he seems like he's more than ready for it. I also love talking to Charlie Pickard. Actually, we floated over there, and he's such a great guy. He talked a little bit to us about kind of what it was like to be a starter last year so suddenly after being out of the spotlight. And that was honestly a great conversation that you don't get to have with a lot of guys.
Yeah, definitely. Sadiq is a guy that's going to make a super big impact for this team this season. I didn't get a chance to talk to him yesterday, but just one of the best athletes at the tight end position in the country. He's a guy that's going potentially, if he has a season that everyone thinks he could have, could be finding himself in those first round conversations. And as we'll get into later, because there's a lot of question marks in the receiver room without Evan Stewart now, that puts even more on Kenyon Sadiq to be that top guy in the pass catching group and really lead this as a guy who kind of, you said played that secondary role next to Ferguson last year, but is a really interesting thing, can do it. We saw the highlights in the Big Ten championship game with the hurdle against Penn State. So really good athlete and can do a lot of things with the ball in his hands. So he's definitely a guy that we'll be looking at.
Absolutely. Who'd you like talking to, man?
I thought I was focused on the receivers because I thought they were really interesting because it's just such a wide open group. But some of the other guys I really thought were interesting. Sione Laulea, cornerback, 6'4", 190, just crazy length. He was the number one JUCO recruit a couple years ago, and he said some really interesting things. I was excited to hear just about the way he's developing his game because I think he's got some of the highest potential on this team out of anybody because 6'4" with that length, being able to move the way he does at cornerback. He was the number one JUCO recruit 2 years ago for a reason. And so it's interesting to hear about what he's been doing in camp, the guys that he's he said Jurion Dickey's been giving him a lot of fun battles, and same for Dickey, said the other way around. So it was really interesting to hear from him yesterday. I also got to hear from Bear Alexander for the first time and talk to Amari Washington from both of those guys are going to be starting on the defensive line this year. It looks like, and it's going to be fun to see them just especially with how successful this defensive line was last year. Derek Harmon came in as a late transfer, had some attention around him at Michigan State, but really took his game to a next level under Tony Tuioti and with Tosh Lupoi's defense being able to play as that B gap pass rusher and really become disruptive. And so Alexander, that's a guy that's really talented, has a pedigree going to Georgia and USC before things didn't work out for him at USC, but very talented guy and excited to see the way he can step into this defense.
Yeah, the other thing that I noticed when Bear was talking was how much he talked about like the impact of seeing what Derek Harmon did here last year, how Harmon came from Michigan State and was really able to get himself into that first round conversation and eventually go in the first round. That was a huge draw for him. And it's a guy that, obviously has offers. He talked a little bit about, the narrative surrounding himself and how he sees that. But this was a guy who, Oregon certainly wasn't the only one looking at him. And to have development like that, where you can bring in a transfer guy and elevate him to the level of Derek Harmon was a huge draw for him. I thought that was really interesting to hear.
Exactly. I think that's something that a lot of the guys that are transferring into this program right now can see and have seen development success stories from the transfer portal from Oregon. Guys like Johnny Cornelius, who came in and was from Rhode Island and became a 2-year starter for the Ducks and was able to parlay that into getting drafted by the Cowboys. Obviously, Derek Harmon, what he was able to do, but it's definitely something that guys like Bear Alexander, Dylan Thieneman are very much aware of, and the ability of, and Theron Johnson, even taking that year with the Ducks, being able to put yourself on a big stage, on a big program, and have that year that can propel you into the first round and to become a real pro prospect in a way that maybe you wouldn't have out of school, like Nevada, like Isaiah World was playing at before. So
absolutely. And we talked about how many like new faces there are in this team. 18 new starters across the two sides. It's unbelievable. The only returner on offense is Poncho, especially now that Evan Stewart's out. That's going to be huge. What do you see from that offense? Why is this so important to have 10 new starters?
Yeah, it's just going to be different. I think there's so much. The Ducks were really a veteran team last year. They had their offensive line. You were bringing back 2 starting tackles. The defensive line was bringing back guys like Jordan Burch. Mateo had a year of experience under his belt. So it's just so many new faces across the board. I think there's a lot of really talented guys, but it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. And because of the projected newness, it kind of leaves everything open right now. There's not as many set positions going into camp because there aren't guys that have had experience from last year, there are guys with experience starting on other teams, but not a lot of guys that have experience playing for this Oregon team. Like you said, on offense, Poncho Iapani Lalaulu, the starting center, is the only returner. He was talking yesterday about how he's looking to kind of propel, similar to what Jackson Powers Johnson was able to do a couple years ago, take his junior year, just really play solid, compete for Remington Award, and be able to potentially work his way into this NFL draft. He said yesterday that he wants to be able to leave for the NFL draft after this year if he puts together the year that he can, and absolutely has the potential to do that. Kenyon Sadiq will be back. He wasn't a starter last year, but got a lot of experience as the number 2 tight end and being the move tight end and being able to use him in different sets. And then Justice Lowe also got a lot of run. And then Matthew Bedford, a guy that was expected to start on this team last year before dealing with injuries that kept him out for almost the entire season. He played a little bit there towards the end, but really lost his starting role. But that's a guy with tons and tons of college experience. He's been in college football since I think 2019, 2018. And so he's started at Indiana, can play different spots on the line, has worked at a little bit of tackle, but should really solidify things in that guard position, because we saw last year with the Ducks at the start of the year, they were moving things around, trying to adjust for a Bedford's injury. That's when you had Charlie Pickard in there. They had Poncho starting at guard. We were able to move him back to center, and then things really locked down from there. Dylan Gabriel got sacked 7 times the first couple of weeks of the season, and then it really stopped after that. So going to be interesting to see how things play out. There's a lot of guys with experience, but a lot of things are really wide open for the Ducks right now.
Yeah, I mean, talking to Bedford too was another great conversation, because when he got hurt, we'd been talking to him, and he came to the media and said, "Hey, I really have to reframe my mentality. I came in here thinking, hey, like, this is my year. I'm going to the draft." And he talked a lot about, how I really had to take a step back and look at what this year is going to be like. And then he comes to media day and says, "Hey, I'm back with that mentality." And that was really strong, because you look at a guy like that, and especially in college, especially, with a lineman like that, when you're fighting for a position, sometimes that doesn't work. And sometimes that player's not going to start. To see Bedford come out at media day and talk like that gives me a lot of confidence in him.
Yeah, and I think just having the amount of time he's had to recover from that injury, he probably could have stretched it and pushed himself to play a little bit more last year. But the way that guys like Dave Iuli had filled in, Nishad Strother had filled in, there wasn't really that need to get him back on the field and kind of stress him in a way that would put him detriment to get re-injured. So I think he's just going to have that time to re-heal and just another year of this offense learning he was sitting behind learning the playbook all of last year and getting comfortable. So definitely a guy that I'll be interested to see what he can do this year in just terms of solidifying things and bringing that veteran presence to the offensive line. And then on defense, you got some big names back. Mateo Uiagalelei had a huge year as a true sophomore last year, is a guy that could project to be in this first round of the NFL draft if he has the year that he can. Just a lot of physical talent off the edge, was able to turn that into production last year. Tatum Tuioti on the other edge spot. He'll be back and just he brings a lot of experience, got a good amount of run during his freshman year, and then started his entire sophomore season. And then, of course, Bryce Betcher in the middle, locking things down at linebacker. MLB draft pick. We know the type of athlete that he is and the experience that he brings, and kind of as a leader for this team. He's going to kind of be a real veteran presence and a leader even more so this year as a redshirt senior. That's
really where I was going to get at. Like this team, Mateo and Tatum, they're experienced players, but maybe they don't have that level of leadership yet. We haven't seen it maybe yet, but Betcher is a guy, especially, because of the fact he plays two sports. Yeah, he's just a guy that, knows how to motivate players. You see that neck roll and you trust him, dude.
Exactly. Exactly. That's how you know he's going to be a physical linebacker. He's going to want to come. I mean, you talk to him during baseball season and he back when he was playing with the Ducks, and he would just be like, I can't wait for football season. I can't wait to go hit somebody, even while he's out there being a Gold Glove center fielder and being able to hit home runs at the plate. But he just likes being physical, likes playing football. Devin Jackson next to him, a guy that wasn't a starter last year, but did get a lot of run mixing in with Betcher and Jeff Boss on that back end. And then one of the more interesting names and someone who I didn't get a chance to talk to yesterday, but I heard from some other people that he's feeling healthy. He's feeling a lot better. Jaleel Florence, a guy that started for this team 2 years ago as a true sophomore opposite of the late Kyrie Jackson on what was a really good Duck defense and a strong secondary for that last Pac-12 year, but missed all of last season with a knee injury that he suffered late in that season against Arizona State. This year, back fully healthy. He was looking to maybe be back around the semifinals if the Ducks had gotten past Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, but just being able to take that full time. He played the spring game and looks like he's trying to get his starting job back on the outside would be big for this team.
Yeah, and really that just cements what we're looking at here, because there are new starters, but they're in no way inexperienced. These are guys who have been in this system for a long time. And something Dan talked about, we haven't really gotten to what he's talked about yet, but how important it was that Will Stein is in year 3 here. That like this is an offense that a lot of these guys here are comfortable with and they understand. It's not a situation where they're trying to install a new understanding of how to play here. And these guys, most of these guys are not guys who have to learn this system. They're implementing. I think that's really important to know.
Yeah, he talked about it right towards the end of his presser yesterday. I shot my hand up to ask. I had a follow-up question for that, and Todd Miles quickly shut me down because we were running out of time there, unfortunately. But I think it's really interesting that this is the first year that for the Ducks, the quarterback's not learning a new offense, or at least under Dan Lanning, because Dan Lanning's first year, Bo Nix is learning the Kenny Dillingham offense. Then Kenny Dillingham leaves for the Arizona State job. Bo Nix, it's not too dissimilar to the Will Stein offense, but just getting a new coordinator, working with somebody else. And then Dylan Gabriel obviously coming in. You have the continuity of Will Stein still being there. Quarterback has to learn a new offense. But with Dylan Gabriel came Dante Moore. Austin Novosad has been here learning in this. Dante Moore got a year to sit and learn this Will Stein offense last year. Austin Novosad's been in it, practicing in it. So I think the two of those guys that are going to be competing for this quarterback job, the fact that they have experience in the offense, not necessarily in games, a little bit, but in practice every day against a top defense that is looking to prove that it's going to be a top defense again this year.
Absolutely.
All right, Owen, are you ready to get into a little bit of a fall camp preview here?
I'm ready, man.
Kind of break down.
It's still the summer. Let's talk some fall camp.
Absolutely. We're gonna start with the offense here because just a lot of interesting battles going on offense, like we talked about with the quarterbacks, with the receivers. Owen, I'll let you start here with what you think is going to be the most interesting battle to watch, because with fall camp starting on Monday or on Wednesday here, there's a lot of things that are wide open for this team and a lot of options that Dan Lanning and his staff are going to have on offense.
Yeah, I mean, there's one position group here that really screams opportunity to me. It is the receivers. That opportunity isn't because of a great reason. You do get guys like Tez who leave for the NFL, Trayshawn who leaves for the NFL, but Evan Stewart, like we know, he suffered a knee injury in June. We don't know the full extent of that yet, but he could be missing a significant or full portion of the season. That opens the door for a lot of guys who came in here with a lot of potential, but have not necessarily shown it yet. DeCorian Moore is the consensus top wide receiver recruit in the country, 5-star recruit there from Duncanville, Texas. He comes in and he's already looked amazing. We saw him in the spring game, just popping with his quarterbacks, but he's not the only one here. We see him as a likely starter here, but there's Justice Lowe, there's Gary Bryant, there's Malik Benson, who comes in from Florida State. These are all guys who are not inexperienced. And I think what you have in this room here with Evan Stewart not there is you're looking for a top dog. That's going to be the biggest thing we're looking for in fall camp and the early part of the season, because you want to say, hey, maybe we've seen freshman wide receivers pop off. Maybe DeCorian Moore can be that guy, but maybe you see a guy like Malik Benson who comes in and there are guys. Dickie was talking. He says Malik is already a guy that is really taking people under his wing. And that really stood out to me because it's not often you see a guy who's a transfer, maybe not in a leadership position like quarterback or linebacker, come in and have guys already talking about what he's doing on the sideline, in the locker room. And that really stood out to me. But this is a room that screams opportunity. We'll see what the outlook is on Evan Stewart. What do you think, John?
Exactly. I wrote about the receivers yesterday, and opportunity was what I started my article with, because opportunity was the word of the day for the receiver group. Dan talked about how it's never exciting to see an injury to happen to one of your players, Evan Stewart going down, but it is exciting just to see the opportunity that these guys are going to have. And then all the receivers yesterday were talking about the opportunity that they have to show their skills, especially some guys, I think, Jurion Dickey, Kyler Casper, guys who have a lot of talent, were highly rated recruits. Casper, a 4-star, Jurion Dickey, a 5-star, one of Dan Lanning's first really highly rated recruits as a 5-star coming out a couple of years ago. But both those guys have been limited by injuries, haven't really been able to show their full potential yet. And so both of them seemed just hungry yesterday. They seemed like they were really excited just to be able to get on the field and show the talent that they have. And then, like you said about Benson, I think it has been interesting to see how quickly players have gravitated to him, because he is a leader in that group, even though he's been new here. And he said he's talked a lot to guys like Gary Bryant, kind of adjusting himself. But as a guy who played at Alabama, he played at Florida State. The young guys in this room know that Malik is a really experienced guy. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. So he's somebody I can rely on to ask questions. And Gary Bryant too. Gary Bryant has been in this offense. He was Bo Nix's number 4 target a couple of years ago. He was a transfer from USC before that, and then missed most of last season because of an injury. But we saw that on the field, what he was able to do as one of Bo Nix's top receivers a couple of years ago. Arizona State game, he takes a screen pass, makes a couple of guys miss, and all of a sudden he's in the end zone for a touchdown 70 yards later. A very talented guy. You can make plays in the slot and be dynamic, and someone who's really stepped up as a leader. He talked about the way that guys like DeCorian Moore, young guys like Jeremiah McClellan, Dylan Gresham, redshirt freshmen, have been coming to him to just go to his house and watch film and ask, how do I run this route? How do I do this thing? Just trying to get as better as they can, because they know that Gary Bryant's a guy with experience at the top levels of college football and has done it before, on a team with a guy like Bo Nix passing to him, where he's one of Bo Nix's favorite targets.
And I mean, especially when you come in with a couple of guys who, are experienced quarterbacks, but not necessarily the level of a Bo Nix or a Dylan Gabriel. It's going to be really interesting to see who shows up as a leader in this room. If it will be a guy like Benson or Gary Bryant, if it's one of those guys, to see who really takes command, because we saw early in the season last year, there is a little bit of a question here. There isn't a question. Sorry, you have Tez and you have Evan. You have established leaders here, and you have an established top 3. There, it really isn't there this year. And so they have a kind of soft early 3 games. We'll talk about that, but that's going to be one of the big narratives that we look at here. Who emerges as the top 3 and who emerges as the guys who are really asserting themselves as leaders.
Yeah, I think this year you could see a lot more rotation throughout that receiver room than you have in other. Last year, it was Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson, and then Trayshawn Holden, and then it ended up being Justice Lowe rotating in. But I think you could see just a lot more rotation across the board, not a set of these are our starters, these are our guys we roll with. You got a lot of guys who are versatile and do different things, play different roles, and I think it's going to be fun for Will Stein to be able to kind of mix and match those guys, find the right way to surround his young quarterbacks with, because I think that's going to be really key is setting up easy reads for Dante Moore and Austin Novosad, setting up easy looks for them. And then, when they they had the opportunity to take advantage of the arm talent that a guy like Dante Moore has. That's something that Malik Benson said yesterday
Yes.
and as well Kyler Casper as well. Both of them were saying. Malik Benson was saying that he just saying that Dante Moore can make throws that not every quarterback can, and he's recognized that in practice so far. And Kyler Casper talking about the way that he can just put the ball where exactly Casper, a guy that's 6'6", is huge at receiver, and Dante Moore can go put that ball out there for him on the fade route and let Casper go up and get it in a place that only Casper can and make a throw that only really Dante Moore and a few select quarterbacks in the college football can.
Yeah, I mean, you remember some of those throws. We've seen it at Oregon. I remember the end of the Washington game, the throw that, ultimately isn't caught, but you can see it fall right into the pocket. And that's what makes receivers want to come play with them. And so we'll talk about it a little bit more, but what are you seeing out of these position groups, man?
Yeah, I think quarterback is another interesting one, just in the fact that they do have it. They're technically leaving it open for now. Dante Moore is the presumed starter, but you also have Austin Novosad in there. And he was a 4-star in the same class as Dante Moore. Dante Moore was ranked the number 3 quarterback in that 2023 class. Austin Novosad, the number 10 quarterback. Dante Moore went to UCLA, got some starts. He got 5 starts that year, but inconsistent on the field. The turnovers were high. He was getting pressure, and I calculated out it was over 40% of his dropbacks. It's a hard situation to succeed in as a quarterback. They didn't have a ton of receiving talent around him. The offensive line wasn't great. I think it was a really mature decision from Moore to be able to he was a guy that's committed to Oregon originally flipped to UCLA. I can't remember if it was a signing day flip or if it was like around that time, but I remember it in December he flipped, and then all of a sudden a year later he's back at Oregon, kind of making the mature decision to understand, hey, I tried it. I tried to go play early, but quarterback more so than any is a position that you need to be able to learn. You need to be able to kind of sit for a little bit and learn just the offense and everything. Those reps in practice are more important at quarterback, I'd say, than almost any other position.
And I mean, and there's not really a better guy to learn from than you come here and you get to spend a year, sitting with Dillon Gabriel, watching film with Dillon Gabriel. And when we got to talk to Dante last year, and when we got to ask Dillon about him, he was absolutely there. He was in Dillon's pocket. He was watching the film. He was learning, and that's exactly what you want to see, because when he makes the move, yeah, it's mature, but you want to see the action. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened, and that's why we think he is the presumed starter, because he has that experience. And he's got that combination of experience, and we've seen the arm talent.
Exactly, he's got the pedigree. He was a top 5 overall recruit in the class of 2023, number 3 quarterback, only behind Arch Manning and Nico Iamaleava. So he's got that prospect pedigree because the arm talent really is there. It's the most talented arm that Oregon's going to have had under center since Justin Herbert, if Dante Moore does get that starting job. So he makes throws that not everybody can. That's why I was really excited to see him with a guy like Evan Stewart, who was a really good player, but I don't know if his role really fit necessarily what this offense was trying to do last year with him in it, because Dillon Gabriel can attack deep and does, but he was towards the bottom. I think he was bottom 5 in average depth of target last year among starting quarterbacks. So he didn't like to push the ball downfield. I think Dante Moore is a guy who is going to push the ball downfield because he has that arm talent to get it down deep down the sidelines. And Evan Stewart, a guy with blazing speed and jump ball abilities. It was going to be a really nice match. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out without Evan Stewart, because I think I was really excited to see that pairing together.
Yeah, I mean, we should give Novosad his flowers. I had a cool conversation with him. He was talking about his experience at the Manning Passing Academy and how we really got to pick Peyton Eli's brains a little bit. And this is a guy, we say Dante Moore has learned a lot from experienced guys. Novosad's got the chance to sit behind Dillon Gabriel and Bo Nix. There are gotten to learn a lot quarterbacks in college football.
And I think the fact that he's been in this Will Stein offense for now 3 years of practicing and understanding it has really helped him. And we saw flashes from him in this spring game. We saw flashes from him in last spring game. He hit a nice deep pass to Decorian Moore this year. You could see the arm talent is there. And he was a top rated quarterback for a reason. So I think it's going to be fun. We don't really know how open this competition is. They're saying it's open for now. Dante Moore is that presumed guy, but the way that they're
email today with the Dante Moore jersey, John.
I did. Email. Yeah, but I think the fact that those guys are going to push each other is going to really kind of get the best for the team, because they're just going to push each other in practice every day, competing and wanting to be the best quarterbacks that they can be for this offense.
Absolutely. I mean, it seems like they're going to have a good, a pretty solid at least line. It is 4 new starters, but they're experienced guys. Isaiah World comes in as a huge transfer the Ducks, and that's really notable. Matthew Bedford is back.
These huge, are not guys huge in terms of his huge in terms of his prospect. Yeah, huge as a prospect. We're standing at the podium,
and I look across the room and I go, "Hey, which one's Isaiah World?"
It's pretty easy.
You can tell who Isaiah World is. He's
I saw him right just after he transferred in the winter. I saw him at Chipotle, and I didn't even need to. I was like, oh, that's definitely the new offensive tackle. That's Isaiah World, because he's a big dude, and he got the double stake, and I was like, that's exactly what you should be doing, because you are a starting offensive tackle in the Big Ten.
And so it is a new line, but these aren't guys who are becoming starters for the first time, and that's really important to note.
Exactly. You got Emmanuel Pregnon at left guard, presumably. You got Matthew Bedford at right guard. Both of those guys weren't on this team, or Bedford was on this team, not starting for them last year, but he was a starter at Indiana for multiple years at different positions. Pregnon had been at USC starting in the Big Ten last year. It was also one of the top transfer offensive linemen, so a big get to just solidify that spot on the inside. And then Alex Harkey, a little bit at lower levels at Texas State, but a guy that has talent at right tackle, has put together some good seasons, and I think that's the spot you could see the most competition between him and a guy like Janoris Wilson, who might have a little more raw physical talent, but isn't as experienced as a guy like Harkey, which I think Dan Lanning and his staff are going to really value, just the experience that a guy like Harkey has when you're pairing him next to a guy like Isaiah World with a lot of college starts. So it's going to be interesting across that offensive line. And I think the centerpiece of it all, it's going to be like a couple years ago when Jackson Powers Johnson really led the offensive line. I think Iapani Laloulu in the middle is really going to lead this offensive line. Poncho was flip-flopping a little bit last year, was expected to start at center, then got moved to guard when an injury hit Matthew Bedford, then went back to center. And once he went back to center, things settled for this offensive line. And he is a very talented pass protector. He's really good at getting out in space against the run, and just a powerful mover in the middle.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about consistency in the staff. Alik Terry is back for another year, and you hear these guys talk about him, and you understand how much they love Alik Terry, and that's really important. Because when you're especially in college, when you have guys moving on so often, and maybe not so much in the NFL, but in college, when you have guys moving on so often, the consistency of the staff, and especially in the offensive line, is really important. And that seems like something that is not going anywhere.
Yeah, and we've seen him really develop guys and be a part of that development for guys like Josh Connerly and guys like a Johnny Cornelius, and turning them into I mean, Josh Connerly, you don't have to do much with that guy. He was a 5-star coming into it, and he's just a very, very athletic offensive tackle. The Washington Commanders are going to be lucky to have him this season. I was rooting for him to land on my Seahawks just to solidify things, because watching him run block last year for this team was just an absolute joy. So I think he's just, like, you've seen Alik Terry do it before and develop these guys. So I think Isaiah World really talked about it too, just the connection he's had with Alik Terry already. He's already put on 10 pounds of just muscle. He's getting stronger, getting faster, just trying to become a better all-around tackle so he can get himself into that first-round conversation, because that's already where he's being projected with just the physical size, movement skills he has at left tackle.
Yeah, and I mean, these linemen are going to have great guys behind him. Mekhi Hughes comes in as the starter from Tulane. He was the number 7 running back transfer in the portal, but this is a guy we were interviewing. He's big. We asked him who his inspirations were, who his idols were as running backs. He says Walter Payton and Bo Jackson. That's the guy you want behind an offensive line like this.
Yeah, not a blazing fast guy, but has the speed to do what he needs to do out there. But like you said, big, tough to tackle. I mean, he put up 1,500 yards, almost 15 touchdowns for Tulane last season. In just 2 years there, he's already put up nearly 2,800 yards, and he's averaging over 5 yards per carry. So it's just production it's like a combination of high volume that like being able to put up high yards per carry and his efficiency as well. So just a really talented guy to have back there, and a guy like we've seen what this team has done with transfer running backs before, coming in for a couple of years, like Bucky Irving, who Oregon has a history with running backs, and Will Stein likes to run the football. This is as much as it's a spread offense, the offense is based on the run and the run game and the RPO game off of that. So he's definitely a guy that will feature heavily in this offense. No, Whittington didn't get to talk to him yesterday. He gave us the no-show at Media Day. Unfortunately, I was standing around waiting to ask him some questions, and SID came over and was like, "Yeah, Noah's not showing up today." So, but a guy that has been to this team now for 3 years, missed almost all of 2 seasons ago, got injured against Colorado, but his first year he was splitting time with Bucky Irving, and then last year did a really good job supplementing what Jordan James can do, because he's just another type of running back, can get out in space. He's pretty good as a receiver. and just open things up. Jaden Lamar will also get some run in there, and I think Dewan Reeves was one of my favorite players to watch last season. Just got some garbage time running a couple games, but I just like the way he runs the football. He was putting up almost like 8 yards per carry in that limited amount of snaps that he got, but you could just see it. I was down on the field watching him run against Washington in the fourth quarter of that game, and I was like, I like what this guy's doing and just the athleticism that he has, the way he moves with it. It's just fun to see.
Awesome, man. Well, we will get into the rest of these position groups that we didn't mention. Tight ends are looking huge this year, and we'll talk about Kenyon Sadiq as we lead up to the season. But let's get into the defense, John. Dan Lanning is a defense-first coach, and that's what this team has really prided itself on. There is one main narrative. What is it?
The secondary. The secondary is you lost all 5 starters from last year's group. So between the cornerbacks and the safeties, both, it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. Obviously, last year it was Jabbar Muhammad and Nico Reed on the outside. You had Brandon Johnson coming in as a transfer from Duke at what Oregon calls the star. It's the nickel in the slot. And then you had experienced guys on the backside, Tysheem Johnson and Kobe Savage. All 5 of them are now gone. So just replacing everybody in that group. Even though you do have guys with experience, you got guys with a lot of talent. Just the fact that they haven't played together before. Secondary is. I talked to Dylan Thieneman about this yesterday, and he's the most experienced guy in that room right now. He's expected to be like the kind of the star of that group. From what
he's
he did
the number one
Purdue
safety
before
in the portal,
transferring in. Exactly. He was nearly an third-team All-American a couple years ago as a true freshman. Put up just an insane season playing as a high safety for that team, and the playing way over the top and be able to cover from side to side, and then also be able to come downhill and impact the run. He's a really talented player, but he talked about just how important communication is in the secondary, especially for a safety. People talk about the middle linebacker being the quarterback of the defense, but in today's game of football where passing is so important, I really think he said it too, that the safety is the quarterback of the defense, because you're the one that's up over the top. You're seeing what everybody's doing, shifting around, calling motions out, making sure the defense is aligned correctly, because you can see everything from over the top, making sure when there's a motion that you're going to have that guy covered. Everyone's going to be able to rotate their zones correctly. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, just because he's a smart football player. You can definitely tell that from talking to him, even for just the 10 minutes that we got to yesterday. But it's going to be interesting to see how that communication plays out when it's an entirely new lineup back there on the backside.
Yeah, and I mean, Thieneman came in the spring, and we're like immediately hearing from guys like Dan,
everybody
Tosh, just about how this guy's a demon in the film, or how they knew immediately.
He said he said yesterday he gets there at 5:30 every day.
Oh my god,
he's there putting in work.
That is the guy you want leading your defense. That's the guy you want in a position like that, and he's smart. He's a great guy to talk to. He has brothers who played the game, and I'm really excited to see what he's about here.
What do you want to get into first with this secondary? We know it's a new group, but do you want to talk about the cornerbacks first or the safeties first? Because it's going to be interesting to see both of those groups kind of come together.
I mean, we can talk about the corners a little bit. What I really did want to talk about was the size here, and that's going to be something that applies to both these groups. But Oregon hasn't traditionally in these first few years under Dan Lanning been a team with massive size. On the outside, even at safety, and we come in and you see a guy like Sione Laulea, 6'4", 190. Like he's sitting at that point. I mean, you can look at these guys.
Good size. Yeah.
A lot of these guys. Naeem Offord is 6'1". Dakota Fields is 6'2". Brandon Finney's 6'2". Dorian Brew is 6 foot. Iffy is 6'1". Like these are guys that provide a different type of challenge. And we heard from the receivers. We heard from guys like Dickey about what it's like to go box with a press corner who's 6'4", not 5'11". And that's going to be really something interesting to look at, because they were talking about how maybe it isn't a bigger challenge so much as a different one.
Yeah, because guys like Jabbar Muhammad and Nico Reed were really good for this team last year, but then all of a sudden you get into games like the Rose Bowl, you get into games like the Ohio State game that the Ducks did win, and you're guarded players like Jeremiah Smith and just big jump ball receivers, and that's when the size really stood out from Oregon and how small those guys were. They were good cover corners, and good side to side, but once you're getting into those jump ball situations with a 6'3", 215-pound monster like Jeremiah Smith, Sione Laulea is going to be able to make those plays in a way that a guy like Jabbar Muhammad couldn't quite. You saw that last year. He had a pretty nasty pick in the Illinois game, and he said it felt good to get the jitters out there coming in late into that game. He got to play in a couple late, but you could just see the ball skills that he has and how much that size really does affect people when they're running down the sideline. So he was definitely one of my favorite players to talk to. And so it's going to be just an interesting battle at the cornerback spot. Who are some of the other guys that you're looking at there that you find interesting?
I am curious here. You touched on Jaleel Florence, so I'll let that sit a little bit. But he is coming back. When we talk about experience from guys, that's going to be really important because he is an experienced guy, especially at Oregon. A lot of these guys are coming in; they're either freshmen or they're transfers. He's going to be a guy who understands what it's like to play at Oregon. He's a carryover player there. Iffy too is going to be interesting because he is another player coming back from injury, but he's spent time in this system. I think that's what's going to be really important because we talk about how this is a different secondary and you're replacing 5 starters, but it's really this, a lot of this is the same. There's not as much change as we're really advertising here.
Yeah, definitely. It's guys who are experienced and have been around, but they haven't necessarily been on the field and putting that production out on Saturday. So that's something that the receivers talked about as well. Gary Bryant said it's going to be fun to see those guys put the work in camp and then see it translate to them for them on the field on Saturday. So a guy we haven't mentioned yet, Ferron Johnson, coming in as a transfer from Northwestern. Right now, I'd say the projected starters on the outside are probably going to be Jaleel Florence and Theron Johnson. Jaleel, if he can reclaim that job, it's obviously these are up for battle in camp, but just because we've seen him do it, we saw him do it in 2023, being a real solid corner for this team. And another guy that does bring length, like you said, at 6'1", 190, can get up into guys and press them. But Theron Johnson, a really good cover corner at Northwestern, was a productive starter for them over the last few years. And in an offense where Northwestern's offense is, or in a defense where Northwestern's offense isn't very good, the defense is on the field very much, and teams are passing on them a lot because it's Northwestern's defense. So he was facing a high volume and still graded out pretty well when you looked at his numbers and stuff. So he just with the Big Ten experience he has, he's a guy that can easily project to slot in, kind of come in like in the similar way that Jabbar Muhammad did last year, coming in from Washington to this defense and instantly finding that starting role and be able to work from there, and being a guy that guys like Sione Lualea and Ife Obadegu, younger guys who don't have that starting experience, can lean on, ask questions, and making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I do want to pick your brain here, though, again, about this second safety spot, because we understand that Dylan Thieneman's going to be a starter, both because of how talented player he is and because of what he brings in that experience. But you look at these other guys, and you really have your pick of specimens, dude. Trey McNutt is the highest safety recruit in school history. He's 6'1", 180. He's a 5-star number 2 safety last year. Kingston Lopa is 6'5", 198. Peyton Woodard 6'2",
just freakish size from Kingston Lopa. He is all of 6'5". That is a big man that he can move around like that on the backside of a defense. It's pretty impressive. You saw him in that Big Ten championship. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Owen, but Kingston Lopa just gets me excited with that size because you saw what they did with him in the Big Ten championship game. It didn't always work necessarily because Tyler Warren's a really good player. He's hard to stop, but they put Kingston Lopa on him because they know that his size is going to be able to at least disrupt things and create problems for Tyler Warren like that. So he's definitely a guy that excites me on that backside.
Yeah, is that the guy that you maybe see as the initial starter there?
I don't know. The guy that I have slotted in to start right now is Aaron Flowers, just because of the production that we've seen him have in this. Like he 8 tackles and an interception in the spring game. He it seems from what we've seen, it's been limited because Dan Lanning has locked practices down for now. So we've been limited in what we've seen, but he had a really good spring game 2 years ago. Was surprisingly on the field to start that one as a true freshman, and then this year put up really good numbers. And at 6'2", 200, he's I think he could play really nicely next to Thieneman because Thieneman will be on that back. Thieneman talked about being able to his versatility that he showed, being able to be utilized in different roles. Last year, his freshman year, he was really a high safety. Last year, it was still mostly a free safety. But in certain games against Oregon, he was mostly playing slot as a nickel. In other games, he would play strong safety, just kind of where Purdue's defense needed him because they know he is such a talented player. I think that versatility will definitely help when you have so many new guys around you. You can kind of move from different spot to spot. But if Thieneman's on the backside and Flowers is that kind of nickel in the box, strong safety role, I think he could be really good at that because when he comes downhill, he likes to hit people and he likes to be a physical football player and likes to get dirty, make tackles. And we've seen him be productive on the ball in coverage as well. So he's the guy that I'm most excited about there, and I think could get that starting job. But I think it really is, like you said, it's open right now in that spot next to Thieneman. Trey McNutt, we don't know what he's going to be able to do as a true freshman, how much run he's going to get, but the highest rated recruit in the history of the school at that position. So just a really talented guy. And then Peyton Woodard, I don't know if we've really covered him yet, but didn't come in with that class because he had to enroll at Alabama with Nick Saban, and then when Saban retired, he hit the portal, came to Oregon late in that. But another guy who really is part of that same class with Flowers and Lopa, a 4-star recruit, very talented. Yeah, he played the most out of those guys last year, mostly on special teams, but also did get some run at safety. So I think all three of those guys are going to be in the mix there. But Eric Flowers for me is the favorite right now.
Absolutely. I mean, and we can move down a little bit here and talk about linebackers because Bryce Betcher said he put on 10 pounds in the offseason. He said he's excited to
Devin
hit
Jackson said the same. Devin Jackson said the same. He said he's up from 230 to 240, and he's still running over 22 miles an hour on the treadmill. So that
that's
guy's
what you
a
look at, right?
freakish size and speed combo. Yeah.
Like, because these were already smart guys. These were already guys who really understand how to play in the system and can be a general there, even if we're looking at a guy like Dylan Thieneman as the leader. But when they put on 10 pounds, and you really have a guy like Bryce Betcher who likes to get downhill, that's what he talked to us about. It adds a different aspect to this defense. It gives you a kind of a different way to play the run, especially not even necessarily like from a scheme perspective, but from an emotional perspective. When you have a guy hitting you that's 230, 240 instead of 210, it matters.
Yeah, because we've seen the development of Dan Lanning's linebacker since he got here. He moved a guy like Jeff Bossa from a safety spot to a linebacker. His first year starting a linebacker, he was about 215. Last year, he was up more towards like the 230 range. Just putting on muscle, putting on weight over time to be able to make a thud when you are coming in, fill in the A gap, fill in the B gap, and getting downhill. But also, what you've seen from Bryce Betcher was last year a lot of development in pass coverage for him, where you saw how much that athleticism that he has, that is we've seen on the baseball field, translates to the football field and be able to cover side to side. And he became it resulted in one of the Burlsworth Trophy for him as the best walk-on in the country, but just a fantastic overall linebacker season for him. And Devin Jackson, another guy who he's more of his straight line speed is really good and he can really get downhill, but that athleticism does translate into pass coverage and makes him a really interesting guy there. Jerry Mixon has also gotten a lot of attention, not as a guy who I think will be in a similar role to where Jackson was last year. Jackson wasn't the starter, but did play over 400 snaps, was rotating pretty consistently with those other guys because you just want to keep them fresh because your linebacker is going to be trying to be in the hole, making plays on every down. So Jerry Mixon has gotten some excitement from within the team about the way he's been playing, just being physical, being active, making tackles, and should rotate in there as well.
Yeah, man, it's going to be one of those spots to watch because the secondary obviously is the place that you're looking for the most change, but this is really a place where you get some similarity, and that's really important when you have a defense here that's there is so much change. You get a spot where not only are these guys returning, but they're guys who are talented returners.
Yeah, a couple of the guys in that secondary that we didn't cover, Jaden Kennedy and Dalen Austin will be competing for that star, that nickel role. I think Kennedy has the edge up there just because of the experience that he has at Ole Miss. The results were a little bit inconsistent at times, but he was being asked to do a lot of different things at Ole Miss last year. He played on the outside. He played at strong safety. He played some free safety even. So I think if you find a consistent role for him in the slot, that's where he was playing for this team in the spring game and did really well there. He's a smaller, quicker guy at 5'10", about like 175, 180 pounds, but you can utilize that speed to be able to cover in a way that Brandon Johnson did for this team in the slot last year. And then Ife Obadegwu, we mentioned him a little bit, but he was a guy that you kept hearing his name over and over again, whether it was from receivers, whether it was from corners, just as a guy that, for the corners, a guy that really has stood out to them as developing a lot in his first year, even when he wasn't on the field. Because he was limited by injury, but they've already seen him kind of take his game to the next level and trying to be able to elevate. And then the receivers were saying he was been one of the toughest guys to match up against just because his combination of size at 6'1", but also with really good speed makes him just difficult to try to run routes against and try to play against. So he's a guy that I'm really excited about. And you kind of have those default starters in there with Jaleel Florence and Theron Johnson, but the Sione Laulea and Ife Obadegwu behind them, those are like the exciting ones because they have a lot of potential, And then even when you see the corners that were brought in this class this year, you got three guys who were ranked as some of the best corners in the country, and Dorian Brew, Brandon Finney, and Naeem Offord. So going to be really exciting to see what those guys can do as they develop through their careers at Oregon.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter until you get on the field, right? So let's talk a little bit about what this schedule looks like. Ducks open up week 1 at home against Montana State. I mean, what are you seeing from this game? It obviously should be a pretty easy win for the Ducks.
Yeah, Oregon has opened their season with these FCS teams of the last couple of years. We saw Portland State a couple of years ago get the absolute beatdown put on them, and then Idaho gave Oregon a lot trickier of a battle than people expected. I think this game will fall somewhere in the middle there. Montana State's a really talented FCS team, but it's still the FCS. I think Oregon just kind of was there were things that they needed to work out at the beginning of last year that resulted in that Idaho game going the way it did. So I think if things play out the way they should in training camp, Oregon should roll through this week 1 Montana State matchup, which will just be good to get a lot of guys action, get confidence in them, and be able to see them on the field and see those results translate on a Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, like the biggest thing we'll be looking at that game is the offensive line, right? Because that's what didn't look great in the first 3 games last year.
Exactly.
That's what we're going to be walking there. We want to see solidity, right? That's what you need.
Yeah, seeing that chemistry between them and making sure that their protections are correctly managed. They're picking up the blitzers that they need to. I think that's going to be big to see from Dante Moore too. As how does he manage his protections? How does he move in the pocket? Because when he was playing at UCLA a couple of years ago, he was under pressure all the time and really saw it affect him as a young quarterback. So it's going to be good to be able to get a little bit of an easier opportunity where those guys are being able to do that on the field. But it's a team that in Montana State that isn't bringing some of the stuff that you'll see at the end of in about a month from that, and when they head out to the East Coast and head to Penn State, what you'll see off the edge there. So it'll be a good warm-up opportunity to be able to kind of get ready for something like that.
Yeah, I mean, and really it's a similar story with Oklahoma State. That was a lot scarier team a couple of years ago. When you look at the construction of the schedule, it looks a lot like last year. You get Montana State, or a strong FCS school. You get Oklahoma State, a strong Power 4 school. Maybe they land maybe in that Boise State range. What are you seeing from these guys?
Yeah, Oklahoma State took a little bit of a step back last year as guys like Ollie Gordon didn't quite have the year that people thought they would. But it's Oklahoma State's a really talented program. They put money into their football team, and they're always going to they're always going to play you tough. And those games can always be a little bit funnier than you expected, because a team like Boise State, keeping that a lot closer 2 years ago, they go to Texas Tech for week 1 or week 2, and that becomes a much closer game that you need a late Jeff Bossa pick 6 to really save. So I think that will be a good chance to kind of test yourself. What is it? Okay, we put it on the field. We've played it against a team like Montana State, but what does this look like against a real Power 4 football team in Oklahoma State, who probably won't be a top 25 team this year, but will be competitive and in games throughout the entire season?
Yeah, I mean, this is something interesting to look at too, just in the fact that these are 2 home games that the Ducks open up the season with, but students won't be on campus. Oregon's a quarter school, so they won't actually be fully at a home game probably until week 7. It's going to be an interesting environment. I'm curious to see what that looks like, because you had a great crowd for the Boise State game last year. It was sold out. It was a night game. Is that going to carry over this year? Because Dan Lanning talked a little bit in his press conference about creating environments in practice where these players feel anxiety. Do you remember that? And that really stuck out to me, because he wanted to. How do I phrase it? He's sitting there talking about he wants his players to be anxious in practice, because that's what you feel in a game, and
it's a hard feeling to recreate. It's a hard feeling to recreate in practice. So it's something that you can really only get on game days and with the game day environment. But the fact that they're going to be practicing in Autzen this year is going to make that a little bit more interesting. Just you're in Autzen, you're kind of getting the experience for some of these freshmen what it's like to play on this field, because they are doing the construction that they're doing with the practice facilities, looking to build the new one that'll open up in a couple of years here. But it'll be fun to see. We won't be able to see them practicing in Autzen, but I think that will kind of help these guys get adjusted and feel a little bit more comfortable there when they do take the field in week 1.
Yeah. And they do head on the road there week 3 at Northwestern. They get to go play on the lake. I'm jealous. And again, this is another, team, in all honesty, it's not a great team. This is, again, a team that Oregon should beat. But when you go on the road early in the season, it is a good test. And I remember that Texas Tech game, because that's a game you say, hey, this is tougher than expected. And this could be one of those tests where you say, hey, it's going to be tougher than expected. Maybe it takes some late effort to get out of this game. And I think that's important, because a lot of these games where you say, hey, it doesn't take effort early in the season, then when you run into a game like Penn State, you haven't had that test yet. The Ducks are really going to have some tests in the season, even if maybe it doesn't look like it when you see the power of these teams.
Yeah, it is Northwestern. Northwestern is traditionally one of the lower tier teams in the Big Ten, but just the fact that you're going on the road within conference so early in the season, you're going to be in an interesting environment with their kind of partially constructed stadium on the lake, which looks really sick on TV when they zoom out and you can see Lake Michigan back behind there. But a bit of a different experience than being in a full Big Ten stadium, But yeah, Northwestern, definitely a game they should be able to win. But like you said, a team that could be a little bit of a surprise in terms of how competitive they are, just because, it is early season Big Ten football. It's an earlier test in the conference than you would normally see the team taking early on in the year.
I mean, absolutely. They do come home. They do play that Oregon State rivalry game in week 4 again. Did you like that idea of playing that game early? I know it's not in conference anymore. They're going to play the Washington game at the end of the year. Does that still work?
Absolutely, as long as that game gets in there somewhere, I think that needs to stay somewhere in that schedule. I understand moving the Washington game to that rivalry week game as it's in conference still, but definitely important to keep Oregon State on the schedule, and same for Washington, to keep Washington State on the schedule. I think those rivalries are those regional rivalries like that are important, and Oregon had ran into trouble on the road in Oregon State a couple years ago that took them out late in the season, really ended their season from in terms of the competitiveness that they thought they would have potentially into the postseason. But Dan was able to bounce back nicely 2 years ago at home, and then last year they go on the road, and that's really the game where it felt like this team came together. They put things together. All of a sudden, Dylan Gabriel's running down the sideline for big touchdowns, and Jalen Lamar is putting together big touchdowns, and this is the first time they put up 40 last year. So Oregon State, when they lost Jonathan Smith, it really hurt that program, set them back a little bit. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how it can be rebuilt from there. It's just hard to do when you're not in a conference the same way as you were before, and as anyone else really is in college football.
Yeah, they do have a quarterback with arm talent. It's Malik Murphy. And what we're hearing from some of the Oregon State beat reporters is that he's got that arm. They're seeing it, but the question is maybe more.
And he was a guy that was a big recruit going to Texas before he even went to Duke. Yeah. So, yeah.
And so the question, as it maybe is at Oregon, is that receiving core. So it's going to be interesting to see really how much firepower they put together by week 4.
Yeah, definitely. Then after week 4, that's when the big test comes on the road, going to Penn State at the end of September. That one's going to be really tough. Owen, what do you think about that game? That's the one that that's scheduling in as the loss for the Ducks, just because how talented this Penn State team is, what they're bringing back in Drew Aller with their running backs and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, just really talented guys throughout that team, and just probably the best overall roster that James Franklin's put together during his time leading the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Big Ten environments, it doesn't really get bigger than the whiteout game in Happy Valley, right? So this is going to be the toughest test the Ducks face all year. Absolutely. In the regular season, there's not a question. I do think, though, if it's going to come at a time for the Ducks, this is a good time maybe for it to come. It's not really at a point necessarily where guys are so worn down.
They'll be fresh for sure.
You get a bye week after this. You're going in kind of with the mentality, just, obviously you want to leave it all on the field, but it's a really, a good spot for the Ducks to put this in. It is going to be a tough game because, the Ducks that beat Penn State last year, most of them are gone. You come into this game and it's not a lot of guys who had, snaps, real experience in that game where they beat Penn State in Indianapolis there. But this is absolutely up in the air. Sometimes those games do come down to the environment, though.
Yeah, and you look back to that game last year in the Big Ten championship game. Oregon does put up 40 points, but Penn State's offense looked explosive in that game. What Drew Aller was able to do, there was some odd confusion on the backside of the secondary in that game that led to some big plays throughout it for Oregon's defense. But what the running backs can do, just the tandem that they have, both of those guys are probably among the 10 best running backs in college football. When you have them on the same team, it really opens things up in kind of a way that like Ohio State's did last year, and even what the Penn State guys did for each other last year. So yeah. It'll be definitely a tough challenge. And then, like you said, after that, getting a bye will be nice for this team, because that we know that game is going to be a battle at Penn State, and they can take a week to rest and recover before they take on Indiana at home. So that will be another interesting one, seeing what Curt Cignetti can do with the second year of this team, getting a talented transfer quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. So that'll be interesting to see. What do you think of that game, Owen?
We can kind of talk about these next 3 games in a little bit of a bubble because you get them in between a couple of bye weeks. It's an interesting period there. It's against Indiana. You go to Rutgers, then you host Wisconsin at home. These are teams that kind of fall in that tier of Big Ten schools where they do pose a real challenge. Maybe they're not kind of rising to that Penn State level, but these are not by any means games that the Ducks will absolutely win. And so it'll be interesting because these are not going to be games maybe where the Ducks can take the foot off the pedal. If they get into a situation, that's going to be really important, because these are games where you're going to go back to back to back in their Big Ten battles. But you really have to, I think you look at them as a chunk there, and you're going to say, hey, can we get through these 3 games? Because that's that middle season chunk where you have guys starting to get injured. It's starting to pile up.
Absolutely. You can't overlook any team in the Big Ten, even the fact that it's going to travel to Rutgers. That'll be Oregon's second East Coast trip of the season at that point because they'll have gone to Penn State. But we saw that catch Washington on a Friday night last year on the road at Rutgers, even though Washington was certainly a more talented team than Rutgers was last year. But you get in the wrong situation, and all of a sudden Rutgers is taking you down. So I think that'll be interesting for the Ducks. And then, like you said, that Wisconsin game. Wisconsin is a team that is kind of in a downswing right now, but with what Luke Fickell has done there, we know he's a good coach, and we know Wisconsin has previously put talent together and has had, back when the Big Ten was split into the two divisions or whatever, Wisconsin would kind of be always that team that was coming out of the group that wasn't your Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. So my younger brother goes there. He feels definitely better about where this team is heading this year than where it was last year. He did not have a good time watching this offense overall last season. He was upset that it was an air raid offense and a team not built for the air raid.
Yeah. Like we mentioned, you get that week 10 bye there, a little chance to recover, but then you go to Iowa. When I look at the schedule and I look at it compared to last year, this is Wisconsin again. This is a game where you go in November to the Midwest.
To a traditional Big Ten territory.
This is maybe I almost want to say this is the most important middle of the season game for these Ducks because of the tone you can set in this game. We saw what it meant when the Ducks really got that win against Wisconsin last year. Obviously, it was a little bit of a different situation with the byes. You were coming off 8 straight weeks of football. But if you go to Iowa and get a win right here, that really sets you up for these last 3 games that are going to be important. If it's a loss there, they're important games here in the back 3 weeks.
Yeah, Iowa's tough every year. They're always going to have a good defense. They're always going to be able to run the football. We'll see what it looks like at their quarterback position and their offense. They're trying to switch things up every year because it seems to never work for them. So, but like you said, going to the Midwest late in the season in November, it's going to be cold. It could potentially be snowing. It's going to be, if you're to look at the schedule and where are the few losses that this team will take? I think the Penn State game is the first game you look at. And I think Iowa is really that next game that you look at as on the road in Big Ten territory against a team that will come to play football. They'll come to be physical and won't back down when Oregon shows up there.
Absolutely. And then these back 3 weeks, we said there were some big battles. Week 12 against Minnesota, you get a chance to come back to Autzen and maybe settle down after that Iowa game. We can talk about that, but then you get USC and then you head to Washington week 14. These last 3 games are going to be important. Again, when we talk about the season in chunks, maybe the last 4 after the bye, but these last 3 games where you get Minnesota maybe as a warm-up game for USC and Washington, what are you seeing from those?
Yeah, I think, like you said, not quite a warm-up game because you don't want to take any Big Ten team lightly, but Minnesota a little bit weaker within the conference, and then USC. It's going to be interesting to see what Lincoln Riley does. I think, what is this, year 3, year 4 for him now? So we've seen it succeed. We've seen it not succeed. They've got another really talented recruiting class coming in this next year, but at home, Autzen, I think that's a game that it's going to be tough for Lincoln Riley to come up to Autzen and be able to win a game on the road. But we'll see. It's a question mark with USC. That team is so up and down year to year that I think it's going to be interesting to see what they're looking like come week 13, because I could easily see them being a top 15 team in the country and being competitive, competing for a playoff spot, competing for maybe a spot in the Big Ten championship game. I could also see them being like 6-5 heading into that kind of game, or like a 5-4 team. So
you will know what they are though by week 13.
I think
you're not playing them week 2, week 3 like a Northwestern. We're gonna know what the Trojans are when they come to Autzen.
Exactly. And then, like you said, wrapping it up on the road at Washington, that's going to be a tough game. I think, honestly, that's the next game I look at after Iowa. That could be a loss potentially for this team because it is a rivalry, because it is Washington. We've seen Washington be able to take games from this team a couple years ago. It seemed like Kalen DeBoer had the upper hand on Dan Lanning for those first couple seasons of them being at their respective programs. And then last year, Dan Lanning bounces back, gets Jed Fish with a big game in Autzen Stadium. So Husky Stadium's a tough place to play. It's loud up there. It's a really sick stadium they have on the water. So that should be a really fun one to have at the end of the season. And Washington's team is going to be good. DeMond Williams is a talented quarterback. I think he's a guy that I think he could surprise a lot of people around the Big Ten this year with what he's able to. I saw him. He was buying golf. I work at Dick's Sporting Goods in the summertime, so he was in there last week buying some new golf clubs. But you could tell that man's an athlete, and you saw what he was able to do late in the season in the couple starts that he did get. He was under pressure all the time in the Oregon game, but still overall delivered a pretty good game. Had some really nice passes to Brandon Boston late in that game. and was able to kind of open things up. And then the Louisville game had some fantastic, ridiculous plays that he made. They lose that one late, but you could definitely see the potential there and why Jedd Fisch was so excited and wanted to be able to take him. Was a commit that Jedd Fisch had at Arizona and then flipped with him to Washington when he made the switch there. So definitely a much more talented team, Husky team, than where they were at a year ago. You've seen Jedd Fisch be able to build up his program and kind of last year he was working with the wreckage of a late Kalen DeBoer exit. So it really messed that team up in terms of their talent retention because they were already losing so much to the NFL. Then they lose other guys. Now this is Jedd Fisch's team. He's had a year in the program and is going to be able to kind of play his football, get his guys out there in kind of a similar way that Dan Lanning was able to kind of build his momentum over time once, he's getting his guys into the program.
Yeah, I mean, I think really the big question for that game is which of these quarterbacks becomes more comfortable in their system and is really able to take command. Because these are two quarterbacks who we see as big risers, who we see as potential contenders for that top of the quarterback kind of area in college football. But, the odds of both of them really rising, we'll see. That's the question, right?
Yeah, I think the top of the Big Ten in terms of their quarterback positions are going to be interesting this year because Drew Aller's obviously the most established guy there, and then Fernando Mendoza is a guy I've seen who could get projected into the first round depending on how he plays at Indiana because he has the talent at Cal. Indiana's offense has been able to do impressive things under Kirk Cignetti last year. But then after that, because Ohio State's bringing in a new starter, because Oregon's bringing in a new starter, Devon Williams had a couple of games at the end of last year once he came in for Will Rogers, but is really a new starter. So I think it's going to be interesting to see those guys that like Dante Mora, like Devon Williams, like Julian Say, who have a lot of potential and see what they can do with these talented rosters that they have around them.
Absolutely, man.
All right. I think that is going to be just about all that we had for tonight's show. It's been super fun being able to talk some Oregon football here. I know Owen's having a good time with this too. So we're just really excited to be able to get this show going here on the Voice of College Football Network. A huge shout out to Mark Rogers and Chris Sadler, some of the guys over there who have helped get us set up with this. We're going to be going probably every Tuesday. We'll be off next week because it's still summertime. I got a vacation planned already, but we'll be here every Tuesday talking Oregon football, breaking down what we're hearing from camp, from these position battles in camp, getting ready for the season. And then once the season starts, we'll be rocking every Monday after the games, breaking down what happened and what to look forward to this next week. And then we'll eventually start working in some call-in shows and be able to get you guys, the audience, involved here. So I'm really excited about this and what we're going to be able to do here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, John. We're really excited to get this kicked off. It's going to be a big season for Oregon. Like we talked about, there's a lot of potential here. Ducks are going to go to some new environments. We're going to be psyched to see what this year looks like.
Absolutely. All right. That's going to do it for us. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next week or in 2 weeks here when I get back from this vacation. We're looking forward to be able to talk more Oregon football and see where these battles are going in spring camp. So we'll be back here soon, and thank you guys so much for watching tonight.